In this module, I'll talk about multi-claused sentences, sentences that have more than one clause, or you could think of that almost as a sentence that has more than one sentence inside of it. So sentences inside of sentences. We can see that in many sentences that we would encounter in the wild, there's a small sentence, sometimes we might call it an embedded one, seems to function like a sister to another head. The whole sentence is describing a head in the same way that an adjective might describe a noun or an adverb might describe a verb. Let's look at some examples. I know the man who you went to school with. You went to school with seems to be describing this who, and this whole thing, who you went to school with, seems to be telling me the man. So this whole clause, who you went to school with, is giving more information about the man. I'm sticking a smaller sentence, you went to school with him, inside this bigger sentence, I know the man who you went to school with. In this one, there's a small sentence, the sun was rising, and I'm using this, the sun was rising, to describe something about when I left home. I left home as the sun was rising, so I'm embedding the smaller sentence inside the bigger one. My classmates tutored me is a small sentence, and then I'm able to embed this small sentence inside of a bigger one. I passed because my classmates tutored me. Just as here, the sun was rising is telling me more about when I left. Here, because my classmates tutored me, is telling me something about why I passed. So it seems to be describing this sort of verb. We're having pizza tonight is what I think. So this we're having pizza tonight seems to be the object of the verb think. The way that I bought a book would be the object of the verb buy. It's what I bought. We're having pizza tonight is what I think. So in each of these sentences, we have a smaller sentence embedded inside it, this underlined one. So we need some sort of element, that's this red element, which would allow us to use a sentence as a complement of, or use it to modify the head, and we call that thing a complementizer. So these red words are complementizers. Complementizers allow languages to actually be recursive. I like him. I think that I like him. So I can embed a smaller sentence, I like him, inside of a bigger one. I think that I like him. You like him. I know whether you like him. Or I don't know whether you like him. You like him. I know whether you like him. I think that I know whether you like him. He said that he thinks that he knows whether you like him, so we can keep embedding and embedding and embedding and embedding and embedding these sentences. All we need is a complementizer, and here that, whether, these are these complementizers which allow me to keep embedding a smaller sentence inside a bigger sentence, which could be embedded inside a bigger sentence, which can be embedded inside of a bigger sentence. This is sort of what makes human language really unique compared to animal communication, is this type of recursion, this ability to embed a sentence inside another sentence inside another sentence, which we see in all of the world's languages. So these, something that can function as sort of sentency on its own, but is embedded within a larger unit, is embedded within a larger sentence, is what we call a clause. So you can have these independent clauses. We've talked about this. Independent clauses are ones that have an overt subject in English. In Spanish or Italian, where the verb itself carries the subject information, or Swahili, we don't necessarily need an overt subject. But all of these could stand alone sort of as a sentence. They each have like a subject and a predicate. So he locked the door. He could be the same thing as Oddmund. I could say Oddmund locked the door. Oddmund came in. That seems fine. There he goes. There Oddmund goes. Oddmund doesn't know something. This seems kind of sentencey. I've got a subject, Oddmund, and a predicate. He doesn't know. It amazed Oddmund. Again, I've got a subject, it, and then a predicate, amazed Oddmund. He didn't know. Oddmund didn't know. He didn't like. Oddmund didn't like. Now I feel like I'm missing an object here. He didn't know something. He didn't like something. But that's where we could get one of these dependent clauses. He got urged. Oddmund got urged. We've got a subject, Oddmund. We've got a predicate. He got urged by someone to do something. Oddmund saw a bird. We've got a subject, Oddmund, a predicate, saw a bird. So these are kind of what we might call like a main clause or an independent clause. And then we have these dependent clauses which could be embedded inside it. He locked the door after he came in. Oddmund came in having surveyed the room. So here, this are sort of dependent clauses. There are clauses that can come in and be inserted into somewhere this larger one. There he goes, annoying everyone again. Oddman doesn't know if he'll get a second chance. It amazed Oddman that everyone was still here. He didn't know whether to go outside. He didn't like giving his mom a speech. He got urged to make his speech short. Oddman saw a bird, which gave him great joy. So we can see in these dependent clauses, some of these are going to be a little bit more than a sentence. They're a sentence plus a complementizer. Here, the complementizers are the blue one, and everything else would be kind of the sentence. We also see that some of these dependent clauses are actually kind of less than a sentence. They seem incomplete. The reason they seem incomplete is they're lacking an overt subject. We don't actually see the subject, but we know that whoever did this act of having surveyed the room is the same person as Oddman. So there's no overt subject here, but it depends on the subject of the main one. So if the subject of the verb in the main clause is the same as the subject of the embedded clause, I don't actually need that subject there. There he goes, annoying everyone again. The person who's going is the same as the person who's annoying. Oddman doesn't know if he'll get a second chance. This seems like a full sentence. If he'll get a second chance, that everyone was there. He didn't know whether to go outside. Here, the person who's going is the same as the person who didn't know. He didn't know whether to go outside. It's not that he didn't know whether she would go outside. In this sentence, he didn't know whether to go outside. The goer outside has to be the same person as the didn't knower. He didn't like giving his mom a speech. Again, the giving the speech person has to be the same subject as the didn't like person. He didn't like his own giving his mom a speech. The subject here is going to be the he. He got urged to make his speech short. The person who's making his speech short is going to be the same person who got urged. So we don't need this overt subject. What this I is showing is that there's no overt subject. It's kind of deleted, but it has to be there sort of underlyingly, because I can interpret that the person doing the doing the annoying, doing the going, doing the giving, doing the making is going to be the same as the subject of the verb in the main clause, that independent clause. So you could say this is the main one, these are embedded one, these are independent, these are dependent, that they get stuck inside. How dependent are clauses? Well, there is actually a little bit of a spectrum. You probably saw there was a lot of different kinds of dependent clauses there. Some clauses are very dependent. These are these bare form infinitives like we have in English, where there's really not much. Some verbs require them. They are anchored in time, but yet they look like they have the infinitive form. Like, I saw her make coffee yesterday. I could say I saw that she made coffee yesterday, in which case I'd be using a much more independent type of dependent clause. But here, I saw her make coffee yesterday. I saw her make coffee every day. So this seems like it's anchored somewhere in the timeline, this in the past, this kind of in the habitual present. I watch her teach English tomorrow. Here, it's anchored in time in the future. I know that because of these adverbs out here. But there's no to the way that I would normally get in an infinitive. I saw her to make coffee. I see her to make coffee. I watch her to teach English. No, it's just this bare verb. So this is the most minimal fragment of clause, the most dependent clause that we have. Two infinitives, in some ways, are like this. They're also, unlike these are detached from time, and that's what the to says. I taught her to make coffee yesterday. Yesterday isn't when she made the coffee. Actually, she maybe didn't even make coffee at all. Yesterday is when I taught her. So unlike these bare form infinitives, where it's the act of making that happened yesterday or the act of teaching that happens tomorrow, in this case, I taught her to make coffee. Any time adverb would refer to the main verb, and this to make coffee is anchored in time. It's detached from time. Now she possesses the ability to make coffee whenever she wants. It's not anchored to a given time. There's clauses which are a little bit less dependent. These are these kind of participial clauses. She made coffee, giving her coworkers a new reason to live. So there's no overt subject for giving her coworkers a new reason to live. You can say, she made coffee, she gave her coworkers a new reason to live. I can combine those two sentences into a single one. She made coffee, and this act of her making coffee gave her coworkers a new reason to live. She made coffee, giving her coworkers a new reason to live. There's an covert subject, kind of a hidden subject here. The person who gave has to be the person who also made. Here, she makes coffee being carefully observed by her coworkers. The person who is carefully observed has to be the same as the person who makes. The subject of this dependent clause is the same as the subject of the independent one up at the beginning. She made coffee picked from the mountains of Nicaragua by free trade farmers. So in this case, it's not the subject, it's not she that's being picked from the mountain of Nicaragua. This is called a passive clause, a passive participial clause, or past participial clause, because the subject of this clause, picked from the mountains of Nicaragua, is the object of the active sentence here. She made the coffee was picked from the mountains of Nicaragua. So she made coffee picked from the mountains of Nicaragua by free trade farmers. It's the coffee that was picked, not she. So in these two, the subject of this dependent clause is the same as the subject of the main clause. In this one, the subject of the dependent clause is the object of the main clause. There's some dependent clauses which are actually not that dependent at all. And I know that they have their own tense information. So a relative clause, aka an adjective clause, is a clause which gives more information about a noun. A subordinate clause, aka an adverb clause, is a clause which will give more information about the nature of a verb's action. So when it happened, why it happened, where it happened, how it happened. And then a complement clause, aka a noun clause, basically this whole thing acts like a noun. It can be the object of a verb, or it could even be the subject of a verb. Something like, that I came in the room surprised me. It surprised me. So that I came in the room acts like a noun phrase in that it can be replaced by the pronoun it, or something like, I saw that she came into the room. I saw it. Again, that she came into the room could be replaced with a pronoun. I saw it. I saw that she came into the room. Those would be complement clauses, and that is that complementizer which starts the complement clause.